Oh.
Oh.
Ooh, it's spoopy.
Yeah, pretty spoopy.
It's what?
What?
You got poop?
What?
I'm just saying that it's spooky. I mean, it's the Halloween special. It's got to look kind of spoopy.
Oh shit, now that you mention it. Oh god.
Oh god, it's got poop.
Oh
Oh god. Oh jeez. Oh shit. Oh god. Oh no. Oh. Happy Halloween, YouTube. This is Adam Noyes of AM Productions, and welcome to this review for the 1977 horror classic-masterpiece, Suspiria, directed by Dario Argento. The Italians. They make awesome spaghetti. But not only do they make awesome spaghetti, they make horrible, horrible mob bosses. And by horrible, I mean they will kill you if you even look at them wrong. But who gives a shit about that? What we want to talk about here is that the Italians knew and know how to make horror films. And I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. And the three people I think of when it comes to Italian horror is Mario Bava, Lucio Fulci, and Dario Argento. And of course there are countless others that have also gone into the Italian horror genre. But I can't think of any three more famous than those people. Like, I've seen a lot of Lucio Fulci's films. Well, I've seen three out of his, like, believe it or not, Lucio Fulci has not directed that many horror films. He's directed a lot of films, from dramas to comedies to just about everything. He made, I think, only like 7 horror films. Don't quote me on that, but he didn't make that many in compared to how many other films he's worked on. And the two that I absolutely loved by him was The Beyond and Zombie 2. The Beyond being the superior of those two films that I just listed. And all of his films have, not just him, but like a lot of the Italian horror films have a lot of gore, naked women, and they're almost on the level of exploitation. Seriously, they are almost on that level of, you know, sort of exploitation. And Dario Argento is kind of no exception to that. He, in my opinion, is the king of Italian horror films. And though I haven't seen many of his films personally, either films that he's directed or films he's produced, I've done a lot of research on the man, and the man was like clearly the king of Italian horror. He was known for Italian horror, both directing, producing, and writing. But he produced and directed, and a lot of people, I actually learned who he was because he produced Dawn of the Dead, the George Romero film made in 1978. And he produced Demons, which was a really terrifying movie as a filmmaker, because of the fact that you're watching a movie and what's happening in the movie winds up happening in real life. That's kind of terrifying, and it's a really creepy, gross body horror film, and a really good, creepy film. I actually recommend it. Very 80s, and that's also part of the charm of the film. But he produced that. And admittedly, this is the only film I've seen where he's directed the film. Actually, no, I take that back. I've seen Deep Red. Deep Red was pretty good, but that's for something else. But admittedly, even though I have seen this and Deep Red, I haven't seen many of the films he's directed. And he's directed quite a few. He's produced and written quite a few more. And all I can say is that this Suspiria is considered his masterpiece. And I really understand why now, having watched it. In fact, even Eli Roth, who I kind of have mixed feelings with, but I really liked his film Cabin Fever, sort of put it best in Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments. Suspiria was number 24, to be exact, which actually that was what introduced me to Suspiria, and as well as a lot of great horror films, by the way. I highly recommend watching the Bravo's 100 Scariest Movie Moments. It's a little dated, but it contains a lot of good films that, you know, you wouldn't have suspected. It's not all cliched. It's got some really interesting picks in it. Introduced me to a lot of good horror films. But Eli Roth said in the section for Suspiria that this film puts the gore back in gorgeous. And that always struck me and always made me laugh. And so when I actually finally watched the film, it's very true. And something that's really interesting about Suspiria is that it's not over the top with its gore. it's not over the top with its violence. I mean, there are points in the film that are unbelievably violent and unbelievably in your face, but they're very few and far between. Not many people die in this film. I think in total, like, only 4 people truly, actually, we see die on screen if you exclude the witch at the end of the film. I think it's only 4. And that's all we really see die on screen. And, you know, for a film that's sort of hailed as one of the greatest horror films ever made, there's not actually that much horror in the film itself. What happens is, because not many people die, it's a slow build-up throughout the film. Like, it feels almost like an eternity between murders, which normally I'd be like, that's kind of a problem. And the way how I'm describing it kind of sounds like a problem. It's not really a problem at all. It's actually a compliment. That the film doesn't go straight for violence, gore, sex, violence, in that order. It takes its time and uses the imagery to its effect, though we'll get into the imagery quite later. But basically what these murders do is it basically wets our mouths. And it's genius. Dario Argento kind of gets, I have a feeling that he kind of gets sort of grouped into sort of the exploitation directors, where a lot of like big named people kind of scoff him off, or a lot of film critics such as Roger Ebert really kind of scoff at him and so on and so forth, which I don't like Roger Ebert, so that never bugged me anyways. But Dario Argento, like Seijun Suzuki, knew what the hell, even Ishiro Honda, they knew what the hell they were doing. They were a lot smarter than what, you know, sort of the mainstream cinematic lingo, or not so much lingo, but the main cinematic sort of critics and people who, you know, take a look at like history of films kind of let on. Dario Argento certainly falls into that realm. And by the way, how those people die, even though, as I said, there's not many, how they die in this film are terrifying and utterly shocking. And it's such a great mixture of both horror and suspense, and it's, I don't know how else to describe it other than it's gorgeously shocking. You know, it's one of those kind of films. And this movie is mainly because this film is shot and edited like a dream. And that really comes out in droves. In fact, Dario Argento in an interview said he wanted this to feel like a Walt Disney horror film, and it certainly does, with the amount of colors that are thrown in the film and how beautiful the film is shot. Oh my God, one of the most beautiful films ever made, in my opinion. And part of that was because this was one of the last films, if not the last film, to actually use 3-strip Technicolor. For those of you who don't know who 3-strip Technicolor is, it often creates a very soft image, which again adds to that sort of dreamlike quality of Suspiria. But films that were shot with 3-strip Technicolor, like The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, and probably the most famous sci-fi film that was shot in 3-strip was War of the Worlds, the one made in 1953, which all of those films have unbelievably vibrant colors and beautiful imagery. And that's because what 3-strip Technicolor was, it's hard to explain. You basically have 3 rolls of film shooting at once. Alright, so if you look at 3-strip Technicolor cameras, they are huge. By the 70s, they were quite a bit smaller, but they were still gargantuan cameras. And so you had 3 strips of film being shot at once. You had one with a red hue, one with a blue hue, and one with either yellow or green hue. I'm pretty sure it was yellow, but don't quote me on that. And basically what they do is they process all of them together, and that's what created the colors. And usually you can tell the difference between 3-strip Technicolor and just regular Technicolor, or even Eastman color at the time period, because 3-strip Technicolor, though unbelievably expensive even by the 70s standards, was gorgeous. I mean, it just captured colors, and so there were every film that they used 3-strip Technicolor in are unbelievably vibrant and colorful and just utterly gorgeous to look at. And it always made me kind of want to see more Japanese films, especially the tokusatsu films, shot in 3-strip Technicolor, even though I don't think they'd be able to have the time, the money, or the budget, the capabilities, sorry, not budget, capabilities to really shoot them. Because what the Japanese used a mixture of things. They used either Eastman color or Technicolor, which they were paler. The colors are more faded and everything. Like the 3-strip Technicolor, if you want a true color, even to this day, I think 3-strip Technicolor is the way to go. Even though now they kind of achieve it cheaply. Like The Godfather, for example, was shot in just regular, Technicolor, where it would take the image, get the color from what was going on around them, and then they'd process them in those certain hues, red, blue, and yellow, and then put them together. So it's an artificial 3-strip Technicolor. But no, true 3-strip Technicolor is utterly gorgeous, and you will never be able to top it, in my opinion. But the use of that 3-strip Technicolor, again, with sort of like the soft image that you get from it, perfectly fits the dreamlike atmosphere that is Suspiria, to get back to the film itself. And this beautiful, and that sort of dreamlike atmosphere and everything like that, and the colors and everything was beautifully captured by the director of photography on this film. His name is Luciano Tovoli, which, to be honest, I have not seen any other film that he has shot. I looked on IMDb, I looked on Wikipedia, I haven't seen any other film that he has shot, though I really kind of want to see that movie with Anthony Hopkins where he plays this Roman general. I do really kind of want to see that, but I have not seen any other film other than Suspiria that he has shot. And the film is color-coded. Suspiria is color-coded with reds, greens, yellows, and blues. So basically the 4 primary colors. And yes, I say 4. There's usually 3, red, green, and blue, but really yellow is more primary than green. But I say those are pretty much the 4 primary colors, and because that's certainly what this film has as well, and certainly what I would use in my own films too. And even if it makes no sense in the given scene that these colors are in, those color palettes are there. For example, the main character's room, her room is always changing colors. One scene to be red, then it'd be green, then it'd be blue, then it'd be yellow, sometimes it'd be a mixture of the colors, and then sometimes it'd be white even during the day. Even if it makes no utter sense why anything is glowing that certain color, it doesn't matter. It's still going to glow that color, which adds to that sort of dreamlike atmosphere and aura of the film that really makes it very effective and actually very creepy, especially when everything starts glowing red or blue. Red and blue are the 2 colors where you know something bad or something sort of paranormal is going on. Usually those are the 2 colors you see whenever that happens. And for example, there's also this one character who gets chased in this room. The room is blue. It's lit blue. Everything is blue in this room except for this one window. This one tiny window on the upper side of the wall is just glowing vibrant yellow. And I love that. It looks so beautiful and gorgeous, and you think it might be distracting. It's really not. It really keeps your eye on the screen. Also mixing that with the camera movements and so on and so forth. It's utterly gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. It's films like this and the color films directed by Seijun Suzuki that make me really want to experiment with color coding. In fact, pretty much all of the short films that I've been making this year and that I've been working on have had this sort of color coding to it, and I sort of want to continue experimenting with what mixing colors would be, especially considering that my last feature film that I shot was completely in black and white, where there was no color at all. And so now I kind of want to play with color and see just what I can do with it. And it's films like this that have really inspired me to go out there and do that, and I want to make that very clear. And another example of sort of like the vibrant colors of the film is that if you look at the blood in this film, it is not realistic blood, which is another reason why this film is sort of toned down compared to like Dario Argento's Deep Red, which is unbelievably gory, or even a Lucio Fulci film. Lucio Fulci films, by the way, some of the greatest gore effects you can ever find, especially in Zombie 2, wow, some of the greatest ones. And I think of like The Beyond, where like there's a scene where this girl gets shot in the back of the head with a pistol and her entire front face blows up. Very realistic gore. Not in Suspiria. Not in Suspiria. The blood in this film is very bright. It is not a dark, normal color blood. Blood sometimes looks almost black. Real blood would look almost black if you just shot it normally. No, the blood in here is very almost orange color, which again sort of adds to the strangeness of the film, and it works in context of the movie. I'm sort of describing that and you think that'd be a detriment, but no, it actually really works if you actually sit down and watch the film and really appreciate the film. And above that, the set design itself of the film is very expressionistic. And expressionism was a movement mainly in the 1920s, a little bit in the 19-teens, in Germany. Very expressionistic films. The most expressionistic film I can think of is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, even though I think that's a little extreme. I personally don't really care for that film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, because of how absolutely insane the set design is on that film. However, elements of that comes in droves in Suspiria. And one of the main things about Expressionism film, I mean, it started off as kind of like a painting style. You know The Scream? There's a painting called The Screamer. That is an Expressionist painting. So movie makers sort of created a movement called Expressionism, and the main purpose of Expressionism was that the set itself was a character. What you were shooting on was a character, and that certainly is in droves in Suspiria. For example, the meeting hall, where our main character goes in and meets all, you know, the heads of this ballet school. Walls are dark blue, almost purple, a violet color, and they have all these strange, swirling black designs all over them. Very, very gorgeous. You'll see murals painted on these red walls with like yellow or green paint, just murals just painted all over these walls throughout the entire place. There isn't one room where you don't see things like that. The arches that you see in films, that you see in the film, there's one, for example, that has like a black ring to it, and the symbolism in there is just beautiful, like something bad is about to happen to these characters as you see her walking down this hallway. The arches are just unbelievably gorgeous. There are pillars that look like Roman columns. There are even giant chunks of this set that looks almost like stained glass. They're even painted kind of like stained glass. Let me make it clear, it's not stained glass. It's just painted and approached and even shot like it is stained glass. And it's just so beautiful, and there's no other way to describe it other than that the set itself is a character. The set itself becomes the universe that this movie takes place in. In fact, not much of this film, it wouldn't surprise me if only about 10 minutes of this film actually takes place outside the confines of this ballet school, which is really cool and really creative, which could be a problem. You know, one of the biggest faults on Which Way They Walk is that the first half of the film takes place entirely indoors. It gets boring, and I fully admit that I should have focused on that more on the set design. The film, it gets kind of boring. With a film like this, it doesn't get boring because of how vibrant everything is colored, and because of the fact that you feel so creepy within the confines of these rooms, and it works so well in terms of a horror film and in terms of a film in general. We have the music by Goblin, and a little bit by Dario Argento. Dario Argento frequently collaborated with Goblin. In fact, I think he actually formed Goblin, or he kind of pushed them all together. And I actually knew Goblin because Goblin did the original music for Dawn of the Dead, the George Romero film. Any of the original music that wasn't library music used in that film was composed by Goblin. The soundtrack for this film is just as important to this film as anything else within it. Like, without the music in Suspiria, the film would not work. It's literally almost as important as Jaws' theme from Jaws or Michael Myers' theme from Halloween. It is that pivotal for the emotions and the expressions of the film. And this soundtrack, and I mean it, I wish I could play a little clip of it, but unfortunately it's copyrighted like crazy because of how successful it is. It goes from these creepy bells mixed with hush whispers to absolute insanity, loud chanting, African drums, loud. You know, it goes from these quiet bells to like this guitar playing. It's just in your face, just unbelievably loud and unbelievably bombastic. And specifically that happens when the murder scenes take place. The movie itself gets extremely loud. For example, the first murder within the first 15 minutes of this film is non-stop noise. The mixture of the two girls screaming, the mixture of glass shattering, and then above that we have that music. Even when there's no sound effects playing during the sequence, that music is. And it is so loud and so in your face, it works. It's shocking, considering how quiet the rest of the film is. You know, the other parts of the film it goes from these really, really loud and bombastic moments constantly to suddenly these really quiet moments, like our two main characters swimming in a pool. They're wearing these red swimsuits in this bright blue pool, and it's so quiet, and all you hear is the sound of the water splashing, and then suddenly like the bells start playing. and it's so quiet and so atmospheric, and all of a sudden it'll go to something really loud. It's a great juxtaposition, and it works beautifully in this film. I can't say that enough. It does. It really works beautifully, and it's so in your face, and it shocks you, and it's really great. And Dario Argento was really good at doing that in this film. And like the set, the music itself is a character, and is basically a warning of the witchcraft that is going on in this ballet school, and the evil that is accompanying those people within it. It's a foreshadow, and it's bizarrely edited as well, and bizarrely placed within the film, but it works. For example, the very opening scene of this film, our main character is walking out of the airport is walking out of an airport, so she's walking out, or she's inside and she's going outside from this airport. Whenever you see, it'll cut to the shot of these doors going outside. Whenever they open, the bells start playing. Goblin's music starts playing, and then they'll shut, and the music will stop. And it actually took me a few viewings to get it, because at first I just thought it was kind of like messy editing, but it's not. Because whenever you see those doors open, the music starts, and whenever you see them close, the music will stop. And then when she goes outside, finally, there is a clash of lightning, and then the music just continues to play even as the doors close, because now she has exited reality, and she has now entered this dream world that is the film itself, the film Suspiria. She has now entered hell. The result of this mise-en-scene is, and I hate to use that kind of pretentious term, but it's the best way to describe it. The result of this mise-en-scene makes this movie almost exclusively pure cinema. I mean, this is almost cinema in its purest form. Because cinema itself is the making of moving images as if they were paintings where the images tell a story. You know, that's cinema. And this film does that in droves. And this film actually reminds me a lot of the silent films made in the 1920s. Specifically the ones made in Germany. And Expressionism and Kammerspiel are the two styles of filmmaking from Germany that really encapsulate this kind of film. Kammerspiel is also known as the unfastened camera, where there's almost no intertitles and relied almost exclusively on the use of imagery. That's Suspiria. Even though there was, sound and there was dialogue and stuff like that, it's very little and far between. Susan Harper, I believe that's what her name is. Susan Harper, she plays Janet from the sequel to Rocky Horror Picture Show, Shock Treatment. A very terrible, terrible movie. She even acts in this movie like a silent movie star. She plays our main lead. She uses much of her expressions to tell the story instead of words and dialogues. Instead of telling you what she's feeling, she shows it. In fact, she doesn't actually have that much dialogue throughout the entire film, which I like. And she always has this look of uneasiness on her face, with her eyes constantly moving around. She always just, and it also helps that she's unbelievably pale. And she always has this look of uneasiness, which works with how she is framed on the screen with the anamorphic widescreen aspect ratio lens that they were using. She's often framed in an enclosed area, within arches or within other characters, which took me a couple viewings to catch, which made me appreciate it more, that I didn't notice at my first viewing, because it's so subliminal. It's one of those sort of subliminal messages that's given to you in the framing of an individual shot with her in it. And because of this mise-en-scene, because of how wonderfully the film itself is pretty much edited, and how beautiful the cinematography is, and how that is used to tell a story more than the actual dialogue is itself, it overcomes many of the problems that the movie's actual story has, as well as some of the bad acting in the film. These two elements, the story itself and the acting, are the weakest parts of the film. And we'll get into that right now. The plot of the film is very basic. An American ballerina goes to a prestigious German ballet school to learn her technique and some new techniques and to better herself. However, her and a friend discover that the people who run this school are cultists who summon witches and feed off of physical harm to others. That's how they get their power. They feed off of the physical harm of others. That's a really simple story. That is a really simple story. It's actually slightly cliched. It's been done before. Even before Suspiria, it has been done before quite a bit. What Dario Argento wanted to do, and this is, I'm not sure about this, but I think this is what he wanted to do, is he wanted to focus almost exclusively on the visuals and the editing of the film to tell the story. So making this really simple plot into something really creative and really original. And I highly respect him. I highly respect him for doing that, because that's what I do. If somebody handed me like this really simple, cliched horror movie script, I'd be like, all right, this is really cliched. How can we not make it cliched? Let's focus on the visuals. Let's focus on the music. Let's make it stand out that way. That's kind of what this film did. Which I'm kind of making it, hopefully this is not how I'm coming across, but this isn't a movie where it's just the aesthetics are pleasing. I truly mean that this is a good film because of how much those aesthetics become a character and affect the actual movie itself. It's not like Tron Legacy where the aesthetics of the film are just pretty, and that's why I like the film. No, this movie, the aesthetics really help the film itself. It really progresses the movie. It really pushes the film above others. The opening credits, for example, in this film are very clumsy. What happens is that at the very beginning of the film, there are these loud jungle bongo music playing, and it's just these white text over a black background. That is actually very Italian. A lot of Italian horror movies began that way, where a film would just start and have like these black background, white credits. I honestly wish, just because of how vibrant and beautiful the rest of the film is, I wish the opening credits happened when our main character got in the car and started driving towards the school, the ballet school. That's when I wish the music, or the opening credits would have started. And I also would have used a different font, but that's just my personal choice. But what really annoys me about the opening credits is that it has this really lackluster narration explaining the situation over the credits. And it's explaining who the main character is, that she's from New York, and that she's flying to Germany to become a better ballerina. I would have completely cut that out. You know, even, like, let's say I had to keep the opening credits. I would have completely have cut out that narration and just have it go into the movie. Because it almost sounded like it was added to clarify what is going on for the audience. It almost sounded like it was added after. Without that narration, we can figure out what's going on. I mean, this movie is pretty intelligent when it goes to, like, hinting stuff at you. But it's not dumb. You know, it's pretty intelligent, but, you know, it's not overly intelligent. It's not a Stanley Kubrick film. You can piece together why she's coming here, where she was from, and so on and so forth by the dialogue and some of her interactions with some of the other minor characters throughout the rest of the film. So I would have cut that out in general. It just felt like such a last-second addition to the film. The acting itself in this film is lackluster. However, I will not attack the actors themselves for the bad acting. They look great. They look the parts. They look genuinely invested in the movie. Most of this is because of the dubbing of the film. And a lot of people don't know that the Italians shot almost exclusively all of their films silent. And this included a lot of these the naturalistic films that were made like just after World War II. They shot almost exclusively all of their films silent, and which means they ADR'd everything. They added every sound effect, every bit of dialogue, everything in post. This includes the Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns, by the way. You know, like A Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That was shot completely silent and everything was added in post. The Italians worked with a lot of other countries. They didn't just work with, you know, people from Italy. They worked with people from France, Germany, England, Spain. So everyone was speaking these different languages. And so they just said, well, screw it, we'll just shoot it silent and then we'll just dub them later. Which I think was actually a smart move and kind of easier to deal with in hindsight. But I actually agree with that. But for example, the dubbing is really bad. When the friend of the main character, there's a scene where, this is actually just before her friend gets murdered, but she's trying to wake up our main character who's been drugged. The sounds that the main character is making while she's trying to wake up, and then the cries of her friend just do not fit the scene. They just do not fit the scene, and it actually kind of takes you out of the moment. And then there's a lot of these like long-winded dialogue sequences. Specifically, there's this 5-minute period that gives you the entire exposition of the film, which I don't really like, but there's this old man doctor explaining everything to our main character, and he's dubbed terribly. I mean, it is just terrible, and it really does, it makes you chuckle because of how terribly it's dubbed, and it really just takes you out of the film. And it's not just this version. I've also seen the film in Italian, and it's the same in the Italian version, and so on and so forth. It just takes you out of the film. It really does. And that's a genuine, true detriment to the film, which is so bad because a lot of the dubbing for, like, A Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the dubbing in those movies I think were very, very competent, and then all of a sudden you have this film where it's just really, really bad. A lot of the Lucio Fulci movies also fall into that trap as well, with terrible, terrible dubbing. It's like the actors themselves give a great performance, have great facial expressions, are legitimately invested in the movie, but it's like the dub is not, and it just really takes you out. And this film kind of ignores logic, but in a good way. This goes back to sort of praising the film. Because you're asking throughout the entire thing, why the hell don't these people just get out of that school? Why don't they just run away? Well, Argento knew this to be a problem. He did. He knew this was going to be a genuine problem in the film. And so what he does is, he doesn't explain much through exposition. I mean, other than that sequence, which I think is a bad scene. I actually don't like this scene at all. Ironically, Udo Kier is in that scene, which Udo Kier plays Dr. Frankenstein and Andy Warhol's Flesh for Frankenstein, you know, that masterpiece. Argento doesn't explain much through exposition. He explains more through images. He tells the story through images and music than he does with the actual dialogue itself. And through lighting and atmosphere, he creates what is like a nightmare. That's the best way I can describe it, and is what is like a nightmare. That where we are within the confines of this film, as soon as we arrive at the ballerina school, at the ballet school, is not reality. So characters can't escape. Characters can't just run away and get the hell out of that school. They are trapped in there. And this is a great way of looking at it, and just to kind of prove my point, is that the friend of the main character gets murdered in an utterly brutal way. And this sequence is total genius, by the way. Total genius. One of the greatest murder sequences ever put to film, in my opinion. Or specifically from a horror film anyways. Through the use of shadows, and through the use of the blue and the red lighting, it creates a very nightmarish, maze-like terror, where there's absolute no escape. It's just like you're constantly trying to navigate your way through the winding hallways of the school, and you're just trapped and cannot get out. And you get that through the lighting and the atmosphere and the music of the film itself, which is genius. And what happens is she goes into this blue room, and this kind of goes into the logic of the film. She goes into this blue room. This is the blue room I was telling about you earlier, where there's this one small window and it's vibrant yellow. And she sees it. She crawls up there, and then she lands on the other side, and she thinks she's escaped because there's a door on the other side of the room that she has now crawled into. What happens is she takes a step forward and immediately falls into a pit of barbed wire. And she's screaming in agony as she's trying desperately to get up, but it's pinching her and it's cutting into her, and she's trying to crawl. A very disturbing scene, only to then have the killers walk in and slit her throat. Which, there are several things that happen to scene in that sequence that makes you go, that doesn't quite fit logic. And when you look at it in hindsight, when you first watch it, you just kind of buy it. But as you start watching it critically, you're like, it kind of escapes logic. But it actually made me like it more because of that sort of nightmarish aura of the film itself, and that sort of nightmarish imagery that Dario Argento was presenting within the film itself. The two logic leaps here is that why doesn't she just look down and see that there's a giant pit of barbed wire there and not take a step forward? Logic would say just
look down, bitch. There's a thing of barbed wire there. Don't step forward.
The other thing is when she gets her throat slit, how doesn't the killer get trapped in the barbed wire? He just kind of appears and slits her throat. And that goes into the whole supernatural element of the film and the whole idea that everything within this movie is not right. And I talked about that extensively before in the review with the lighting and so on and so forth and use of colors. An example, the main character's room changing colors constantly. That everything in this film is wrong. And in a good way. This isn't like in a bad way where, you know, things kind of happen. Logic tells us, you know, that they should just get out of there. And again, Argento says nope, and through editing and everything like that explains it just how nightmarish the entire place is, and it's great. And it goes from loud and bombastic to just silence. And in that sequence is great. This is a great testament to the editing as well. Before she falls into the pit of barbed wire, it goes quiet. As she was climbing up and getting into the room, it was this loud music, and then all of a sudden, as soon as she gets into the room with the barbed wire, it goes silent, and you see her looking around in a look of hope. And as soon as she falls into the barbed wire pit, that music starts again, and it just gets unbelievably loud, mixed with her screaming, and then the sounds of the doors opening, and then the sound of her throat being slit. It's great. Great editing. It was truly fantastic editing. I gotta tell you, when I was watching this with my friend Mark and my friend John, and we were just kind of watching the film. When that happened, as soon as she fell into the barbed wire pit, my friend John genuinely gasped. Genuinely was shocked by what was going on the screen, and genuinely kind of like crawling in his skin. Not to, quote the horrible Linkin Park song. And I was like, this works, this is great. And I'm so happy that he loves the film as much as he does. I mean, he told me afterwards, a couple days later, like how much he's just obsessing over the film. One of the detriments of the film, however, is much of what happens is explained by the friend to the main character off screen. And what I mean by that is that the friend hears all of this crap going on off screen through a short scene of exposition, tells our main character what she heard, instead of us, experiencing it. This annoyed me because it goes against a lot of what Argento was going for throughout the rest of the film, and what I've been talking about quite a bit throughout this review, or this analysis. It feels almost like it was added later by someone else, however, I know for a fact that it's not. I would have preferred it if we actually saw her friend hearing and seeing these things going on, where it was all done through audio and all done through visuals and so on and so forth. I would have preferred that, and would have stayed more to the kind of I wouldn't call them themes, but the sort of visual elements of the film that this movie really excels at. For example, there's several scenes where she talks about she hears raspy breathing behind the walls, and she hears people walking behind these walls and on the ceilings and so on and so forth. I wish we'd had scenes where we saw that. We didn't just hear her talking about it, we saw that. And I would have preferred that because, again, it would have just kept in line with everything that Dario Argento was going for within the film itself. As for the film as a whole, I wish there was actually less dialogue. And there actually, believe it or not, despite what I've been saying, there isn't that much dialogue in the film itself. There really genuinely isn't compared to a lot of horror films. There isn't much dialogue in this film. It's just some of these dialogue sequences in the film are pretty damn clumsy. Not just in terms of the dubbing, but I mean, they're just clumsy itself. I just would have wished there was less dialogue overall. I would have made this almost a pure experience film, where you fill in the blanks yourself. That's how I would have done it. And that's what Dario Argento was genuinely going for most of the time within the confines of this film. And he succeeds 90% of the time in the film, but there's that 10% that just really pulls you out of the film, and I cannot ignore that. It's a genuine, in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion, a fault of this otherwise fantastic and beautiful movie. Suspiria itself, as I've just stated, is an unbelievably amazing, beautiful film, but it's not a flawless film, with some great scenes of atmosphere and suspense, which is what the film was going for. I truly, from the bottom of my heart, recommend this to everyone. And I seriously mean to everyone, except maybe your children. I recommend this movie to anyone, to cinema lovers, to horror lovers, to just anyone. Because this film is as close to pure cinema as we're probably ever going to get. It's so, the use of imagery to tell the story, the use of music to tell the story, the use of visualizations with the actors to tell the story, without there being much for dialogue, it is beautiful in this film. And this sort of goes against, a lot of the tropes of standard horror movies. And this movie makes me wish more horror movies were made like this. And I'm not saying there are bad horror movies, that there aren't good horror movies anymore. I just recently watched It Follows. That was an excellent horror film. I recommend that one a lot too. It's an excellent horror film. Suspiria is another one of those films where I wish more horror films were kind of made and presented like this. And this film has inspired me to experiment with color and so on and so forth. And I highly recommend you check it out. And not only check it out once, but check it out twice. Watch it once, Sit back for a day to let it kind of process, or just let a day go by, and then watch it again. And I tell you, you will notice a lot more of those subtleties that I've mentioned throughout this entire review. Those hints of story through the images, the music cues throughout the film that I've been telling you about in the 42 minutes I've been talking. And because of that, I give this film a 3.5 out of 4 stars. This is a wonderful, wonderful movie. All I can say is I can't wait to get that Blu-ray. This is another movie too. If you can, I recommend you get it on Blu-ray. Get it in full high definition, as vibrant of the like turn up all the colors on your television screen. Blow out all the colors. It just adds to the experience of the film. I highly recommend it. So, leave a comment. Tell me how stupid I am. It's usually what happens, or explaining how much you enjoy the film or how much you want to watch the film. Hit the subscribe button for all up-to-date information about what's coming on to the or what's been uploaded onto the AN Productions YouTube channel. Go on Facebook and like the AN Productions channel or the Facebook page to get all up-to-date information about what's coming out, what I'm doing, even text reviews and so on and so forth at AN Productions, like the Godzilla Saga for all up-to-date information on my book series. And join Geeks for Geeks if you wish to have conversations with people about films such as Suspiria or kaiju films or so on and so forth, and just have a good time. Promote yourself on there and what you make and what you love to do and what you love to talk about. You are more than welcome on Geeks for Geeks. And in the end, this is Adam Noyes of AN Productions saying, Happy Halloween, motherfuckers. And I better check on Mark. Mark's been in the bathroom for quite a while. Mark?